Hello there everyone, and welcome back to my Devlog series on the MySpace project. I know it's been quite a while since the last video, but I've used the break to work on a whole bunch of things, which I'm really looking forward to presenting to you in this video. Before I get started though, I wanted to give a huge thank you to all of you that have supported me on this journey so far. Whether that's through writing inspiring comments, or helping me out with the game itself by making music, coming up with ideas, or even just listening to me bragging about my latest incredible feature. I really do appreciate it, and it's been super helpful at motivating me to keep working on the project, especially through the less exciting parts. Well, now that I've got that off my heart, let's see what I've got up to in the past couple weeks. First of all, we have a main menu now. It's not fully implemented into the rest of the game yet, and for now there's only options for changing the window size as well as toggling full screen and VSync. But it was fun to play around with the GUI library I'm using, and it offered a welcome change from the work on the game engine. Talking of which, it now has support for key bindings, and I'm planning on adding a menu for that as well in the future. Moving on, probably the biggest thing I've worked on is serialization. Serialization is the process of translating data structures or object state into a format that can be stored. Or in other words, it's what's needed to save the game. It's one of those things that you can't really see, but it's absolutely vital to any city builder. So initially, I tried to come up with a list of the things that would have to be saved. But I realized quite quickly that that's not going to lead anywhere. So rather than making each system decide what to store, I just added serializers for all components of an entity, meaning that literally everything is saved. Furthermore, I wanted the save format to be as human readable as possible. So I really only had two options, XML and JSON. I used XML already for loading the map and settings, and as I'm a lazy person, I decided to use it for serialization as well. Storing the entire state of a game object has another huge implication. It means that any set of objects can be loaded directly from an XML file without the need to create the entities in code and then add the required components. Here you can see a short example of me changing the XML and placing objects in the game without having to restart the entire program. It's pretty cool, eh? Being able to load objects from XML in real time opens up a whole new set of options. The items used in the game must no longer be created directly in code, which, in theory, even allows the player to change certain parameters themselves. There's no support for scripting at the moment, and it's unlikely I'm gonna add it in the future, so I'm afraid real modding will be off the table for now. But it's definitely better than nothing. Having the serialization working, I figured it was time to start working on the fundamental mechanic of all city building games. This meant that I had to think a bit more closely about what it is that I actually want to build, more specifically what the shape is going to be. So I settled on restricting the shape of all buildings to be rectangular. And this has a couple of advantages. First of all, it makes it easier to update the map when a new building has been placed. I also want to allow the player to rotate buildings, and again, making sure they're rectangular makes things a hell of a lot simpler. One of my main concerns was to give some feedback to the player as to whether or not a building can be placed at a certain position. So my first idea was to just tint the color of the preview texture greenish or reddish, depending on whether there's enough space at the current position. I've done a very similar thing when working on the game for my final year school project, and I wasn't really satisfied with it back then. So I thought, since I've hopefully improved my programming since then, I want to aim for something slightly fancier. In the background, you can see what I've ended up with. It isn't perfect by any means, but I still consider it a vast improvement over my previous attempts. Not only can the player see the exact tiles that prevent the building from being placed, but also the tiles surrounding it, giving extra information like a potential blocked path after the building has been placed. Further, the footprint of the building is displayed in grey tiles, which in itself is quite helpful given that the game's 45-degree top-down view can sometimes make it difficult to guess how big a building actually is. Finally, I spent some time coming up with a method to check whether the cursor is currently on top of some of the game's UI, so that I can disable the object placement if that's the case. In order to add some visual feedback, I also made sure not to draw the preview if the cursor isn't in building mode. So at this point, I wanted this to feel a bit more like an actual game. So I added the ability to move the camera around, which is either done by using the WASD keys or by moving the mouse towards the edges of the screen. Finally, a short announcement. Currently there's an exhibition on the colonization of Mars, hosted in the Design Museum here in London. The exhibition is really cool by itself, but beyond that, I think it could actually be quite useful in terms of game design, and just a good way to get some new ideas as well. I went there with friends before Christmas, but unfortunately I lost the footage. I'm more than happy to pop along for another visit though, so it'd be cool to know if that's something you guys would be interested in. Anyway, that's all for now, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please take a second and hit that like button below. And while you're here, you might also consider subscribing to the channel, as it's the best way to be informed about new content as soon as it's out. So as always, thanks for watching everyone, and have a great day.